Welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Romano. This video will be about how to protect your family assets and how to prolong wealth over multiple generations. Now, you don't need to be a millionaire. You don't need to be a billionaire to do this. You simply have to have parents or yourself as a parent to have assets. Now, this is not an expensive method. It's a basic method that's been around for 100 years minimum. So I want to share my story with you, because if I just tell you definition, you're not going to remember the definition. But if I tell you my story, you could apply what you've learned and apply it to your own life and how to protect yourself. Now, whether you're a parent or you're a sibling and you have parents, over time people develop to have assets, a house, etc. But in my case, my parents had real estate in New York City. My father, it's not that he wasn't educated, he was educated in a different way. He knew how to establish businesses, build them up and sell them. And then in return, he would buy real estate with that. The other thing was he didn't know how to manage the real estate or to write checks, because he couldn't even write in English. But he knew how to make money. He just didn't know how to keep it. And in this case, sometimes you have an older sibling or a younger sibling that is very helpful and wants to help them and write and do the accounting, do the bookkeeping, rent out the property, etc. That's the one you have to be concerned about. If you have 3 brothers and sisters, or 4, or just you and your sister, or you have 2 siblings, you all have to be included on doing that. I know that you have a life, and I know that you have responsibilities, and it's just better to let someone else take care of it because you don't want to be bothered. But by doing that, you're allowing them to take everything, and they will take everything. Now, in my case, I had she's still alive, but I had a sister who was writing the checks out for my parents and their business and so forth for a good 25 years. She's such a cheat that she took the money from my parents and she put the money in her own checkbook and wrote out the checks directly. So on paper, she has $500,000 of checks that she wrote. She knew what she was doing, and because she saved all of that, she's a real fraud. She's evil. You have no clue how evil she is. Now, growing up, I seen this, but my father and mother did not, because my father and mother are very loving, and they want to keep their whole focus was to keep the family together under any circumstances. It didn't matter. And I would tell my father, please, Dad, you can't trust her. And you know what he would say to me? He would say, don't talk about your sister like that. She would never do that. Well, 25 years later, she did. And she took everything from him and my mom and evicted them out of their own house with an eviction notice. So she got the real estate in her name because they were being sued, and she kept saying, oh, you don't want to have that in your name because they're going to take it away from you. Every possible excuse she came up with. And the sad thing is that I would tell my family, you need to fix this situation. And they would go to her and they would say, it's time to get everything out of your name. So unfortunately, because she's a manipulator and an abuser, she would make them feel bad. And she would say, oh, you don't trust me, and all this nonsense that a manipulator makes. A manipulative person does. Now, there's something called Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome, in psychology, we learn that the abuser makes the person that they're abusing feel bad and feel as if the abuser is protecting them. So if your sibling or even your spouse comes and says that, oh, I'm protecting you, but I'm doing it all for you, that's the abusive person. Now, when it's happening, you don't realize this, but if you study psychology like I do, you would realize. So over 20 years, my sister, every time my father would try to fix the situation, she would make him feel bad. And he was very gullible. My mother, the same thing. She would make her feel bad. And she would use this against my father. So when my mother would go to tell her, you need to fix the situation and get this house out of your name, she would tell my mom, oh, but what if you get a divorce? You're gonna let him take half the house? So she was putting in my mother's mind that she was protecting my mother. That's called Stockholm Syndrome. The next thing is she somehow, when my parents said that, she went to the bank and she took out all the equity out of the house. She sold their other building and she says there was nothing left. Did my parents look at the documents? Did my father find out what happened? No, he trusted her. Who knows what happened? And so in my case, I was so young, my parents are not going to listen to me. I told them when I was 12 years old what's going to happen, and look what happened. She took everything. My parents are still alive, by the way, and their rental property is gone, and their house is also gone. So they have no pension, they have nothing because of what they did. So now, what they could have done was they could have created a private foundation or a trust. It doesn't cost a lot. And what they should have done, they needed to create a private foundation and create an LLC for their rental property. So the LLC would be created in the state that the property is in. So that was New York City. And in New York City, they had a warehouse, an apartment building with retail in the front. They needed to create an LLC and name it the property's name. So if it's 150-17 Avenue, you put LLC at the end. So it's the address with LLC at the end. And it's very important that you do that. You don't want to put a name. Better to keep things private than have people know what you have. Because there are those people who are gold diggers in this world. And they'll look you up and they will try to find what you have. So if they created a LLC for that property, they would still have that. They would be collecting the rent. That's thousands of dollars every month. And I would have gotten something, a little income when they die, as well as my brother, right? It would have been a little pension. But instead, my sister took everything. And not only did she take it, but she took it when they were alive. That's an abusive person. She convinced my mother and my father that she was always the victim. And that's an abuser. When they reverse it, that's the abuser. Words like, oh, you don't trust me, but I'm doing it just for you. And that she would reverse it around and say, because I'm the one that would tell my parents to fix the situation, she would say, oh, he's only caring about his inheritance. But you see what she did? She took everything. Now, I do have a cousin that did the exact same thing to her family. She was the one that was doing the bookkeeping for the family. And my aunts and uncles, they had several houses. She wanted to get the house in her name, one of them, because there was 3 brothers and sisters. And she kept pushing it. So when my aunt died, she kept pushing my uncle to do it. Somehow, the older brother and the middle brother were very smart. They didn't trust her, and I didn't trust her either. What had happened was, she basically was stealing thousands of dollars over I don't know how many years, and they wanted to know where the money was. They wanted to see the parents' books and accounting and stuff like that. That's only right. And unfortunately, If your parents are still alive and you do have a sibling that's taking care of it, it is your responsibility to make sure you see every month what's coming in the income and what's going out. That's your responsibility. If one child is doing it, then all the kids have to do it together. Do not let someone else take responsibility, because when you allow that, you're allowing them to cheat. So once the two brothers found out that she did this, they took her to court. She convinced the father to put the house in her name, or somehow she got a mortgage and she took out the equity, because she knew at that point, once they found out, they weren't going to give her the house. Now, of course, she made her soft dad, he's very soft, he's a very nice person, made him feel bad. Now, not only did she make him feel bad, but she took all the mother's jewelry. It just happens to be from an Italian family, and back in those days, women actually got dressed up when they went out. They would buy big jewelry, and it was all show-off type of thing. And in everyone's wedding, christening, etc. My sister did the exact same thing. She took my parents' jewelry, and I told my mother to buy a safe and put her jewelry in the safe, and my mother did. But what does she do? She trusts my sister with the code. So she gives my sister the code to the safe and a key. What does my sister do? She changes the code, and my mom can't get her own jewelry. And every time my mother wanted to get jewelry out of the safe, she would say to my mother, "Oh, you don't need that," and she would walk away. My mother also told my sister multiple times, "We need to fix this situation and get the house is out of your name." And what she would do, she would walk away, or she would say, "Oh, you need to get a divorce first. You're going to let him take half the house," meaning let my father take half the house. So basically, at a certain point, once it was like 4 or 5 years later, legally, she's allowed to keep the houses in a way. She went to my parents' filing cabinet and she took all of the checks. There was a box full of checks that my mother was saving. So back in those days, the bank would send you the copies of the checks that were cashed. My mother saved every single check since the 1970s. My sister went into her filing cabinet, went through everything, and threw them away or took them. So now my mother has no proof that, what was going on. And not only that, but my sister was cheating my parents even by writing out the checks. So she was taking the cash, my parents' cash, to pay the bills, and she would write out the check with her own checking account. So on paper, it looks that she has like $500,000 in checks. Now, how does someone that's not even making 20 grand a year have all that money to do that? Exactly. But in a court of law, you have to have proof. And so she's the one that had the proof, whereas my parents, they have no proof because my sister took all those checks. Now, so again, okay, it was like basically fighting with a cat all the time. The cat would run away. She would run out of the house, or she would do so many things. I mean, this story could go on and on. But I want to talk about another story. I have a friend who, when his father died, they were worth several billion. So when the father died, the mother changed the will, and she left my friend out of the will. Now, if the father, who had billions, would have created a private foundation with his assets, that would not have happened. Secondly, the mother sued him for divorce a long time ago, and she got half his assets. So not only did the mother take half of the assets, but when he died, she was still with him. She took all the rest of it. So, and she did what she wanted to do with the wealth. She gave it to the other siblings. Unfortunately, in my friend's case, He never got along with his mother because she was a monster. And some of these women or men that marry into wealth, like old money, they have a sort of shark type of personality, control issues. Again, that's the more dominant person, the more dominant child, and they will always do everything to control what they want. And that's where you have to stop that. I have another friend who's also worth probably $8 billion, and I'm serious about this, I'm not lying. The grandfather or the great-grandfather established a lot of wealth. Because the great-grandfather did not create a private foundation and put all his assets into that private foundation, each generation inherited the money, and the money was separated. Now today, there's still a lot left over, but the mother, maybe she's a little religious, or maybe she wants to give, she's generous. She's threatening to 2 kids that she's going to give everything away. That's not her money to give away. That's her great-grandfather's money. She should never, the great-grandfather should have never, ever allowed any money to go to anyone in the family. He should have created a private foundation, put all his assets into the private foundation. They would have never paid estate tax. They would have never been able to get sued and have the assets, taken away, or whatever happens. So part of asset management and asset protection is to create a private foundation and put your assets into that private foundation. As I mentioned previously, you create an LLC for each property. The owner of the LLC is the private foundation. All you are is basically the managers of that private foundation. And whoever doesn't want to manage it is the beneficiaries. Or you could be both. It just depends. Now, what's really important, so my cousin, and that's just one cousin that I'm talking about, my sister, my 2 friends, my 2 friends are very wealthy, but it doesn't matter if they're worth billions or millions, that's wealth. And so instead of my uncle separating the 3 houses or whatever it was between the 3 different kids, the wealth is going to be gone before they retire. That's just how it is. They'll want to open a business, they'll want to buy a car, they'll want to whatever. Now, I had an uncle also who died, and it just happens to be that he was my father's partner for many years, and he also created wealth. When he died, very suddenly, his assets were also divided. And unfortunately, one of the siblings' husband decides that he wants to go buy a hot rod. The money's wasted, it's gone. So if my uncle had taken everything and put into a private foundation, that would never have happened. Now, what if the cousin got a divorce and he took half? So that's what happens in many generations. And so you don't want that to happen. So what you have to do is you create a private foundation, and in the private foundation, if you're the parent, you do this, or if you're the siblings, you make your parents do this. Don't listen to them and say, oh, your sister and brother's never going to do that. They love you. If they're saying that, it's going to happen. Because the abuser is using Stockholm syndrome to get their way and make people feel bad. And so my sister even did it to both boyfriends. I don't know if they were called boyfriends because they barely, they didn't, whatever, I'm not going to get into it. She did that to her 2 boyfriends. She kept making them feel bad. She would say, if you want to come over, you need to buy me a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of wine. And if you don't, then don't bother to come over. She would threaten my parents that if you don't do this, then I'm not doing this. And so that's why you want to create a private foundation, is because there are evil siblings out there. Now, in my case of my mother's side of the family, there was a situation that kind of also happened. For example, when my grandfather died on my mother's side, he saved every dime, and he would tell them that he had no money. The fact was he was just cheap. and he was extremely frugal. He never fixed up the house, nothing. Everything was paid off cash. But he got a stroke and he got dementia. So he needed to be put in a nursing home. What happens when you need to be put in a nursing home? They look for your assets and they want you to liquidate, and that money is going to go in a special account, and the nursing home is going to draw from it every month. That whole situation could have not happened if my grandfather created a private foundation and put his house and his savings account into that private foundation. And when he needed to be put in a nursing home, the nursing home wouldn't have been able to do that. So the family wealth, whatever it was, $1 million, $2 million, would still be there, and it'd still be generating income because they could have rented out the house. Yes, there's like 4 siblings, and probably that would be $500 a month income, but it's still income. And they could have taken the money that he had in his bank account and buy another house with it and rent it out. But they didn't do that. They each took their share, and that was it, and the money's gone. That also my sister took, by the way. Yes, she took every dime of that. I didn't see anything. Now, unfortunately, there are those people who don't understand finance and business management, and they have no skills to understand that. And it doesn't matter if you go to college or you go to finish high school. It simply matters is the ability to make it happen. And so my mom, she didn't have that ability. She can't really do those. She's a housewife. That's all she was, really, in a way. She did work, but she didn't have that ability to understand things. For example, when my sister took the house and his building, I told my father to go to the lawyer and put an addendum on the deed to state what's going on. My sister told my mother not to do that, and she turned it around and she made it like, oh, you don't trust me? She made my mother feel bad. And so my mother didn't do that. But the attorney was actually very good with putting the bill of sale in the deed. So there was the proof. Now, the other situation that happens is that, so now that your parents die, let's say, and you inherit, everything's in the trust, and you become the beneficiaries of that trust or private foundation. I like to call it a trust, but actually the private foundation is better. Now, your husband or your wife is going to say, oh, let's liquidate it. They may be really nice to you for 20 years, but there's a reason why they're saying that, because they want that money. And so are you really going to let them take that money? People could get a divorce anytime. Your own husband or wife is probably cheating on you every single night, and you don't even know about it. That's a fact, how these things happen. So in a private foundation, the difference between a private foundation and a trust is one simple difference. The trust could be broken by a judge and could be changed. The private foundation cannot be changed. So when your parents or you as a parent create the private foundation, you want to create a document. I'm not going to tell you the name of the document because it depends which country you're in. But this document states what is going to happen when the guarantor, the one who creates the trust, dies, right? So you need to put on who's going to be the manager of that trust. I highly advise you to get an outsourced company to do that, a company that specializes in trusts and wills and estates. There's a company in Chicago up north that's a trust company. I just gave you the name, so figure it out. I can't tell you the exact name, but that's one of the best companies out there. Now, when you create the trust, the private foundation, you do not want to create it in America. And there's a reason for that. You want it to be separate than America. So you need to find a country where their constitution protects their people. So that's Belize and that's Luxembourg. There's only 2 countries in the world that have privacy laws in such a high degree. Now, so you don't have to actually go to those countries. You could actually hire a company that does it for you. All it is an entity, like an LLC. So you're simply creating like the LLC in another country, but it's really called a private foundation. It doesn't cost thousands of dollars to do this, couple thousand, that's it. That's where you create and file that document. In the document, you want to make sure that you protect yourself against your evil siblings and your evil spouse. You're not going to know that they're evil in the beginning or when things are going okay. You will know that once they cheat you. That's how it works in life. Your best friend has been the one that has been cheating you all this time and you didn't even know. How many of us actually had that happen? In that document, you want to say that you cannot, the beneficiaries cannot borrow against the private foundation. There's a reason for that. Because if your evil spouse wants to open a business, you'll protect yourself and your sisters and brothers against that person. You do not want to do that. So it says no lien against the the private foundation. If you sell that real estate, another piece of property also has to be bought in exchange. That's really important. Remember, real estate is one of the most lucrative markets there are. Don't worry about it going up and down. If you just happen to buy at the height of the market, don't worry about it. Because in 10, 15 years, it's going to be worth a lot more. So again, that's two. If you sell it, you have to buy something comparable, so an exchange. The first one was no liens against the private foundation. And the third one, so it's not that you're exempt in income taxes. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer. I'm simply someone that is sharing my advice and situation. I'm a doctor of finance. And so in one of our classes that we had to take, actually it was my MBA class, second MBA was risk management insurance. So that's where you would learn how to protect your assets for multiple generations. So for example, Henry Ford said, "I control everything, but I own nothing." What did he mean by that? He basically can't get sued. So no one could sue Henry Ford's trust, but they could sue him, but he had nothing in his name, so what are they going to get, right? In this case, if you do have a house or a couple of houses, whatever it is, and you're renting them out, you need to create a separate LLC that's a manager for that real estate and those assets. And you want the real estate, whatever it is, management, whatever you want to call it, that entity, that LLC, is the one that rents the apartments, the assets, etc. So that if the person renting your property is going to sue you because they fall or something, they have to sue the LLC that's the manager LLC, because that's what basically the rent, that's where so in the lease you write, there's another video that I have to create, but you write in the lease of the person who rents your property who's responsible for what. You never say the landlord's responsible for this and that. You say the management company is responsible for removing the snow, fixing the garage door, fixing the outside of the house, cutting the grass, replacing the dishwasher and the washing machines, whatever. You never put the landlord that's responsible for anything. So you want to remove the litigation from the landlord or the trust, the LLC. So once you've established your foreign private foundation, now you are basically, if you get sued personally and you don't have any assets, they're not going to take anything away from you because a foreign judge, so a US judge is going to say, oh, you have to liquidate your private foundation. When that document goes to the foreign country, particularly Belize or Luxembourg, the foreign judge will throw that out of court because a foreign judge does not have jurisdiction in that particular country. In other countries, yes, they do, but in those two countries that I mentioned, they do not. Now, you're basically creating a rock solid private foundation. Now, you have to remember that not only are you protecting yourself against being sued, but you're also protecting yourself against evil spouses and evil siblings. Because your evil spouse will not be able to sort of take from that. If your parents or yourself have filed that document, as I mentioned, you're not allowed to gain liens on it. You're only allowed a certain percent per year. Let's say it's doing $100,000 a year of income. Part of that money, you need to put it back into the private foundation to build wealth. And I'm gonna talk to you in another video on how to do that. But in this video, I want you to listen to my story, and I want you to take the story to your heart and share it with everyone you know, because there's no reason for anyone else to get cheated. So as I have mentioned, you want to file that document and make sure you do it properly. There's a reason why that it's not healthy to liquidate. And so you want to create that particular paragraph, whatever you want to call it, a clause, is that even when you die as a parent and it goes to your next generation, you want to make sure that that particular wealth is still in the family. Do not separate it. Think about the wealthiest people in all of times, which was the Vanderbilts, the Carnegies. There's so many, names that I could, the Rockefellers even. If their ancestor had created a private foundation and put all their assets into that private foundation, that wealth would still be there. Even the dukes and duchesses of Europe, if they had put their wealth in their private foundation, they would never have to pay estate tax. Today, a lot of the wealthy dukes and duchesses of England are actually poor. They have to live in rented houses. Now think about, if you have 5 generations, the wealth is still in the private foundation. Think about how much wealthy that would be. So instead of donating your wealth to charities, you could even donate your wealth to the private foundation for future generations. It is up to you to give. If you want to help people, I would advise you to do it directly. Do not just give money away to charities, because the money never goes to the actual people. For example, homeless. If those wealthy people that are giving their money away to charities are actually doing something beneficial for society, there would be no one sleeping in tents out in my city. So there's many charities in the state that I'm from, but yet we have people living in tents. So how about this? Do not give your money away. Give your money to your private foundation when you die, or if it's your parents' private foundation, you also give the money to your private foundation. And there's going to be another video I'm making on how to protect your assets against your spouse. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to my video. Please remember as well as thumbs up. It's so important that you do thumbs up because other people will see my videos. And remember to share my videos with at least 5 people. I want to help you and all your friends and everyone watching, so share the video with as many people as you can. Honestly, there's no reason why we have to sit back and allow our siblings or our parents to lose what they have. It's not right. It has nothing to do with being greedy. It simply has to do with a one principle, is protect yourself. And by doing that, you're protecting your family and future generations. If you have any questions, send it to the live chat and I'll make future videos on your questions. Thank you so much for watching.